What would happen if USAID stopped all humanitarian aid forever? Alright, imagine this. One morning, headlines across the world scream: USAID shuts down, no more foreign aid. No more food assistance, no more disaster relief, no more support for struggling economies. At first, it might not seem like a big deal. Most of us don't see this aid in action every day. But the reality? This single decision could send shockwaves across the entire planet, reshaping economies, politics, and even the fate of millions of lives. But why? What does USAID actually do, and what would happen if it just vanished? Let's break it down. First, what is USAID and why does it exist? If you're not familiar with USAID, here's the quick version. It's one of the world's largest providers of foreign aid, funded by the US government to help countries in crisis, whether it's from wars, natural disasters, poverty, or health emergencies. The idea behind it? Helping nations become more stable and self-sufficient, while also promoting global security and, let's be honest, maintaining US influence worldwide. Every year, billions of dollars flow from USAID into more than 100 countries, funding everything from hunger relief and emergency medical aid to economic development and education programs. But here's the big question: if all of that stopped tomorrow, what would actually happen? Immediate chaos. The first 6 months. At first, most people might not notice the effects right away. After all, foreign aid isn't something we see in our daily lives. But for millions of people around the world, especially in the poorest regions, the impact would be immediate and devastating. Let's start with food aid. USAID provides life-saving food assistance to over 100 million people a year. If that suddenly disappeared, countries dealing with drought, famine, or economic collapse, like parts of Somalia, Yemen, and Afghanistan, would be hit the hardest. We're talking massive spikes in malnutrition, starvation, and food shortages within just weeks. Then there's healthcare. USAID plays a major role in global vaccination programs, disease prevention, and maternal health services. Without it, we could see a rise in preventable diseases like malaria, polio, and tuberculosis, leading to millions of deaths, especially among children. And let's not forget refugee camps, many of which are entirely dependent on humanitarian aid. Without USAID funding, organizations like the United Nations World Food Programme and UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency, would face major shortfalls, meaning millions of refugees could lose food, water, and medical care overnight. 6 months to 2 years, political instability and global security risks. Now let's zoom out a bit. Within 6 months to 2 years, things start getting really messy. Think about countries recovering from war or political crisis, places like South Sudan, Haiti, or Syria. USAID plays a big role in stabilizing post-conflict regions by funding programs that help rebuild economies, create jobs, and provide education. Without that support? Economic collapse, more violence, and a surge in extremism. And here's where it gets really scary. Terrorist organizations and criminal groups thrive in unstable environments. When economies fail and people are desperate for income, extremist groups like ISIS, Al-Shabaab, and Boko Haram step in, offering money, food, and shelter, but at a terrible cost. Recruitment into violent groups would skyrocket. Meanwhile, in Latin America, USAID funds programs that help combat drug cartels and reduce violence. Without that aid, drug trafficking, gang violence, and migration crises could explode, pushing millions of people to flee north toward the U.S. border, leading to one of the largest migration waves in modern history. The long-term fallout: 5 to 10 years without USAID. Fast forward 5 to 10 years, and the damage is even more widespread. By this point, many developing countries that relied on USAID would have weaker economies, collapsing healthcare systems, and rising political instability. This wouldn't just affect them, it would directly impact the global economy. For example, USAID funds a lot of small business initiatives in Africa and Asia, helping countries grow industries like agriculture, technology, and manufacturing. Without this support, some economies could stagnate or collapse, leading to more poverty, more migration, and less trade, which, ironically, would also hurt the US economy. And speaking of economics, there's one more twist: China. With the US pulling out of humanitarian aid, China would likely step in and expand its influence through its Belt and Road Initiative, using investments to gain political control over struggling nations. In other words, by cutting aid, the US might actually weaken its own global power, handing more influence to rival nations. Could the world adapt without US aid? Now, could other organizations fill the gap? Well, to some extent, yes. The United Nations, European Union, and private charities could try to increase their aid efforts, but the sheer scale of US aid's funding would be nearly impossible to replace overnight. And even if other nations or organizations stepped up, it would still take years for them to build the same networks and infrastructure that US aid already has in place. By then, the damage would already be done. The big picture: why this would affect everyone. At the end of the day, US aid isn't just about helping other countries, it's about global stability. Think of it like this: a small problem in one country can quickly spiral into a global crisis. If food shortages in Africa turn into mass migration, if collapsing economies in the Middle East lead to more terrorism, or if struggling nations turn to rival powers for support, it all circles back to impact the rest of the world, including the US. So, even if some people argue that cutting foreign aid would save money, the reality is that the cost of dealing with the long-term consequences, wars, refugee crises, and economic collapses, would be far greater. Final thought: could US aid ever actually end? Could this actually happen? Could the US really cut off all humanitarian aid permanently? Well, while some politicians and critics argue that foreign aid should be reduced, completely stopping US aid would be extremely unlikely, because even from a self-interest perspective, it helps maintain US influence, protects national security, and prevents global disasters that would eventually reach US borders. To become self-sufficient without US aid, countries need to strengthen their economies by developing local industries, supporting small businesses, and attracting foreign investment. Investing in education and skill development ensures a capable workforce, while modernizing agriculture reduces food dependency. Fighting corruption and improving governance prevent mismanagement of resources, and building strong trade partnerships diversifies economic opportunities. It's a long-term process, but with strategic planning, nations can thrive independently and even become future aid providers instead of recipients. But hey, who knows? If you're watching this in the future, maybe US aid really did shut down, and we're living in a completely different world because of it. Until then, let's just appreciate that humanitarian aid isn't just about charity, it's about keeping the world from falling apart. And if you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into global events, history, and mind-blowing what-if scenarios. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.